The Day After program will discuss 5 global challenges that COVID-19 has brought to the forefront of public debate. Inspired by classical and contemporary films, we'll discuss with global leading intellectuals the challenges and we'll try to find new narratives to old problems. Today we'll discuss the issue of human and nature, and we will do so with Jennifer Morgan, the Executive Director of Greenpeace International, and Roger Hallam, the co-founder of Extinction Rebellion movement. So we're saying hello to Roger Hallam, the co-founder of Extinction Rebellion, one of the most talked about movements in the world today that are doing many activities to raise awareness to climate action and to environmental issues. Hello, Roger.
Hi.
So just to give us a bit of orientation, where are you talking from now? Are you under any lockdown? And
Yeah, well, I lived in Wales in the UK for 20 years, so I'm back in Wales on a small organic farm in the hills, as it were, escaping from COVID virus, but I'm usually in London.
And how is your work, activism, and the movement itself influenced by the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, my personal work hasn't really changed that much because I spend most of my time on Zoom talking to people. So it hasn't really changed that much. Obviously, it's changed for the movement because it's been more difficult to do things on the streets and what have you. So, but as we come out of that period, assuming we are, then yeah, we'll be moving more towards causing disturbances on the streets.
So on a personal level, you work a lot on Zoom, but the movement is mostly out there in public spaces, trying to disturb the order, let's say. So I guess this was very much affected by the lockdown.
Yes, it was. Well, like everything in the world, everything's been affected by the lockdown, including, climate activism and what have you. So it's been very difficult. It's been very difficult on many levels, but it's also, I think, woken people up to the reality that nature exists and humanity has to accommodate itself to the demands of nature. And if it doesn't, then it will go extinct.
So for environmental-minded people, the connection between a global pandemic and the environmental issues is quite clear. I understand, that there is a cause and effect, but not many people do this connection. I'm very surprised always at that. How do you try and bring this connection to public awareness, or how do you advertise your causes in view of the coronavirus situation?
I think we just need to sort of understand what we're talking about here, which is we're talking about the potential end of humanity due to its inability to understand its relationship with nature. And put that more precisely, if we put carbon dioxide and similar greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, then it will cause the weather chaos and a massive increase in global temperatures, which will lead to the inability of humanity to grow food at scale, which will lead to mass starvation and social collapse. So we're not talking about an environmental issue here. We're not talking about saving the local river or recycling a bit of plastic. What we're talking about is the very essence of what we exist for, which is to continue our existence, to look after our children, our communities, and our nations. So the frame that you use of environmentalism, for me personally, is completely out of date. Environmentalism assumes that there's an environment and then there's us, which is the fundamental problem here. There isn't the environment and there isn't us. There's one thing, which is nature, which includes us. It includes our bodies, our local environment, and the geophysical system of the whole planet. And on each of those levels, we're completely integrated with the environment. It's a massive problem. And it's not a cause, it's not an issue, it's not a campaign, it's everything, it's everything. And the reason why millions of people are moving towards mass civil disobedience all around the world is because of this realization that we very likely have left this too late. And in so much as we haven't left it too late, then we need a massive transformation in our consciousness, in our economies, in our society, and in our form of governance. And I'm not saying that because I'm some mad radical or anything, right? I've been in business most of my life, and you know, I'm an average sort of guy. I've been an organic farmer for 20 years, and I'm saying it because 2 + 2 = 4. If you put CO2 into the atmosphere, you kill humanity, period. Right? You just don't want to go there.
Yeah, but it seems that it's very clear to you, but I'm not sure that it's clear to other people or most of the population of the world, and also governments and other players and stakeholders such as companies. So what is
No,
a
no,
very
but it's
clear way of thinking?
we're not talking about whether something's clear or not clear. What we're talking about is whether something exists or not, right? I
Yeah.
mean, a lot of the global media is, you know, addicted to a sort of postmodernist idea. There's just issues and opinions and positions and arguments. There's not. There's also something called reality. So reality is basically death. Whatever you do, you're going to die at some point, whatever your opinion, you know, and whatever your culture and whatever your background. You know, we're biological beings in a biological system. And if you destroy that biological system, then you destroy your children's livelihoods. That's not a matter of debate. It's a matter of geophysics and biological, like, reality. So we have to start from that point and continue from that point. And this is the big change I think that Extinction Rebellion is trying, you know, imperfectly, obviously, to try and bring about, is to say to the media sphere, to our cultures, to our various warring political factions, that there's something coming down the road which is going to destroy all our values, you know, assuming we're not psychopaths.
Yeah,
And
but you say postmodernism. It's not postmodernism. Our responsibility, my responsibility as a journalist, is to bring awareness. So it's to bring whatever you say into a broader platform. So it's not that I'm bringing issues and then I'll bring someone else who thinks otherwise than you. It's just to tell people whatever you're telling them.
well, I would challenge that your identity as a journalist. I think your first identity is as a human being, and a human being has responsibilities. You know, and the first responsibility of a human being is to follow the moral law, which is universal across all cultures, which basically means don't shit on other people. You know, that's the basis of all human moral cultures. And the other major problem we have is people think they are what they do. We aren't what we do. We are what we are, right? Which is first of all human beings. So the first responsibility of journalists isn't to spread awareness. The first responsibility of journalists is to fulfill their responsibilities as human beings. And in the present context, that requires to rebel against the governments that are pursuing this genocidal project.
Okay,
I mean,
so
that's
now,
difficult. It's
yes,
difficult, right?
of course it's difficult. No, you've made,
let's just acknowledge it's difficult, right? Because we all love to hide behind our roles. You know, this is the banality of evil argument of Hannah Arendt, isn't it?
yeah.
Right? Is that we all love to come into work in the morning and think, I'm just doing this little bit. I'm not responsible for the whole thing. I'm just responsible for my little cog. And that's great. You know, 95% of the time, that's great. But at certain points in human history, it's not great, because you're participating in a society and a system which is bringing us to our destruction objectively. And the challenge to each of us, and to myself, and to you as a journalist, and to your company, and to people in Israel and people in the UK, is to go, oh, right, that is the reality. And once we've accepted that, then it becomes a lot more easy to accept that we have to break the law, and we have to go into civil disobedience against the governments. You potentially have to go to jail. You potentially have to make major sacrifices. And that's the moral imperative at this particular time in history, because of the objective situation we're in.
So the first question is, I challenge you doing all this activism without the press covering it, and reaching the scale of publicity you are reaching thanks to the media. And the other part of the question is, okay, now that we have the ideological or scientific, as you call it, basis for your ideology or for your point of view, how do you justify disobeying the law, which is what you're doing in many of your activities?
Okay, so the oldest trick in the book when you're dealing with tyranny and evil is to say, I'm doing a good job, and if I didn't do it, no one would do it, as an excuse for not like confronting evil in a society. And history is full of people going, what's the point in me giving up my nice job if, what good is that going to do? Well, as we know, like that's like a profoundly morally decrepit attitude, right? The fact of the matter is we all have responsibilities, and it's not a matter of whether it makes a point or not. It's a matter of integrity. When you are confronted with a social evil, you have to make a choice to participate in that. And you have a choice whether to go into resistance against it. And the only morally coherent position when a society engages in radical evil is to go into resistance against that. And you can justify that from lots of different religious and political and social traditions. So, I'll just return the challenge to you that journalists have a responsibility to break the law in this particular context because of the extremity of what we're dealing with. And if that means you lose your job, then so be it, right? Because that's your responsibility as a human being and as someone who presumably has a moral tradition. As far as the science and the ideology concerned, all I can say to you is science isn't an ideology, right? An ideology is a system. An ideology is a system of reduced thinking that reduces the world into a particular point of view. What we're talking about here is reality, the most basic reality, which is life and death. That's not subject to ideological interpretation. It's obvious, right? If you jump off a cliff, you're going to die.
I didn't say the scientific part of what you were saying is not correct, or I was asking questions about it. I was asking, how do you go from this scientific fact that you're mentioning to your activism? What's the step you're doing there from, okay, we're doomed, to, okay, let's lock ourselves to a subway car?
Well, I think it's self-evident that when you are presented with a situation where a government, in full knowledge of the science, in full knowledge of the effects of its actions, continues to participate in an activity that is guaranteed to destroy the lives of the next generation, then it's your moral duty to resist that government. When a government fails to protect the people have a responsibility to remove the government, period, right? That's what it's about. It's a contract. And in the Declaration of Rebellion that Extinction Rebellion made 2 years ago, we made clear that the social contract is now shattered. It's shattered because the governments are engaging explicitly and knowingly in a project that is going to destroy all we love. It's going to destroy our rights. It's going to destroy our civilization. It's going to destroy all the work that people have put into creating a semi-civilized society over the last 200 years. I mean, there's no greater crime, as a lawyer that I know in London put it, right? This is what we're facing, and we're seeing the effects of it all around the world. And at some point, it will go non-linear. And when it goes non-linear, in other words, it becomes a mass death event, then we'll be all scrabbling around thinking, why didn't we act in time? We're not at that point yet, but that's what our children are going to be asking of us. Why didn't we act?
So what are you striving for when you do those, activism acts? What are you demanding?
It's a visceral response to a genocide project. It's not a, reasonable, we're liberal people, we have a little bit of a problem, we'd like a little bit of an improvement here. We're going to sit down in the streets for a day or so to get something to sort this problem out, right? That's not where we are anymore. We might have been there in 1990 when scientists told us that if we don't sort out the, putting carbon into the atmosphere, we're facing ecological collapse. Ecological collapse, by the way, is a euphemism for social collapse. And social collapse is a euphemism for mass murder, mass slaughter, mass rape, right? That's what we're talking about here. It's
Yeah,
not,
but
it's not.
after you have the message out, what are you demanding on a practical level? How we can do a U-turn from this,
Everyone knows what the practical solution to it is. There's no problem with knowing what to do. We're in a climate emergency. We're putting CO2 in the atmosphere, and we have to stop doing it. This is a simple system, right? It's not a complicated, multifaceted problem. The CO2 that we put into the atmosphere, and the governments need to legislate to stop it being put in the atmosphere. The problem is that
putting a solar panel on our house, or stopping all flights and all cars immediately from now till eternity?
The reason why you're asking how is because you don't want to do it, right? You know how
I'm
to do it.
willing to. Give me options and I'll, tag along. I'm just wondering, what are these options? How, on a personal level, on a national level, on an industrial level, how we can reduce emissions?
Okay, so if you're a farmer and you're putting poison on your field and you don't want to put poison on your field, then what do?
Stop poisoning my field.
Correct. If you're putting CO2 into the atmosphere and you want to stop putting CO2 into the atmosphere, what do?
So this is the question. What do I do? Do I not fly to visit my old grandmother abroad? Or do I just, today I'll take the bus instead of a car?
I'm not going to give you the answer because you're playing games with me. You know precisely what's necessary. You just don't want to go there. Everyone knows what to do when there's a crisis, right? This isn't a strategy. It's not it's not something where there's loads of different options anymore, right? The governments of the world have to massively decrease carbon emissions. They're not going to, because the public isn't demanding it and the economic system doesn't want it to happen. So what does that mean?
What
does that mean
between us?
Well, let me finish. What that means is a minority of people that are sensitive enough to be in touch with the moral traditions of their culture need to go into active resistance against that government.
Yes.
In order to maintain their self-respect, right? The solution to the problem isn't the problem. The solution to the problem is that a critical mass of people haven't woken up to their responsibilities yet. And when they do, and that doesn't need to be lots of people, as you may know, a government will fundamentally change its policies when something like 3% of the population go into active resistance against it, right? That's what the social science says.
Yes, it is. But the solution, there are varied solutions. And I think the difference between us is that you assume people are bad. They know what's the solution, but they don't want to do it. You're asking these questions because you don't want to do it. And I assume that people are good. They do want to change their way of life. They do want to help and be part of the solution. They just don't know how. This is the difference between us. And this is why I think Extinction Rebellion is so different in the map of environmental activism.
Yeah, I think with all due respect, you're social scientifically illiterate on that point. How structural change is brought about is not through awareness. Awareness is not the major determinant of social change. Material disruption is the major determinant.
It's the first step towards there.
Absolutely. But the first step was done in 1990. It's not like the information isn't out there. The information has been out there for decades. When a people decide that they want to change something, as Martin Luther King showed, is they get to a point where they want to decide, then they decide they are serious about bringing about change. And when they're serious about bringing about change, they go beyond awareness raising, right? What Martin Luther King said to the Black communities in the American South, and it's been done by Gandhi and lots of other people, the fundamental point he was making was awareness raising doesn't create change. What creates change is social conflict created by mass participation civil disobedience, because it creates the emotional turmoil in the society, the emotional questioning in the society, and of course the material cost and the reputational cost to the opponent. And that's what brings about policy change. And there was no policy change on structural racism in America between the American Civil War and the Civil Rights Movement, broadly speaking. The reason the Civil Rights Movement brought about that change was because thousands of people decided to break the law and all the consequences of that. And it wasn't particularly pretty, right? It's not something you want to
well,
undertake.
I know history as much as you do, and I know that in feminism, Black movements, and many other movements, it was when the strong people connected with the weak groups, and together they have brought the change. This is why you also need me in your fight. You cannot do it by yourself, just by chaining yourself to a subway car. You need the people, and you need also the companies, and you need the governments alongside with you. Otherwise, there won't be any change.
Not correct, no.
It is correct.
With all due respect.
It is correct.
I mean, I study radical political change. I do research at King's
Who
College.
gave women the right to vote? Men, right? So we need men in order, to promote our feminism causes. We need the bad guys, let's say, in order to promote environmental causes.
The reason the women got the vote is because women decided to get on and cause civil disobedience, regardless of what the men
but
thought.
at the end of the day, who went in the parliament and gave them the right and changed the law? Who in the parliament changed the law?
Sure, you're right, but that wasn't the causal element. The causal element was social disruption created by women. Yes, otherwise the men would have done it in the first place.
This was
right?
the solution. This was the solution, and we're talking about solutions. We're post-awareness, as you said that. Anyway,
yes,
we don't have enough of time. We have to finish, but I'll let you finish with one sentence, one message that you do want to take advantage of this.
Well, I just want to finish by saying everything I'm saying is all with all due respect to yourself and your orientation and the culture you come from and your social class and your role as a journalist. I'm not in the business of like judging souls or whatever. I'm just telling you as a scholar and as someone that's helped set up one of the biggest social movements in the world, is nothing's going to change without political disruption. And political disruption means people getting arrested and going to prison. That's where we're up to. And the reason why people engage in that is not because of some intellectual cognitive process. It's because in their stomach, they feel sick. It's an emotional situation. It's due to crying at night because you realize everything you love is going to disappear. That's why people go to the street. It's not because they've made some intellectual calculation. And that process will be brought forward and enlarged by people going to the street. In other words, it's action that will create the action. And the professional classes around the world, including journalists, in my view, need to understand their responsibilities. And they have a responsibility to break the law as well and to break the norms and be clear about what we're facing here and not to continue the delusion that the climate emergency is just some more other issue. It's just an item on the news. That's your responsibility. That's my proposition to you.
I can just hope that by insulting people like you are doing, you'll succeed. Because
well, I'm not. Let me make clear. I have no intention to insult you. If you feel insulted, then obviously that's the way it is. But I want to be absolutely clear that I am not here to judge you or to judge anyone else. I'm here to challenge your behavior and your actions on the basis of a universal moral law. That's what I'm trying to say to you.
But you know who's judging your behavior and your actions when you stop a subway car in London and a poor cleaning lady could not get to her work and she's fired because of that. I'm not sure she'll reduce, carbon emissions thanks to this action.
Yes, that's true. So it's difficult, isn't it?
Yes.
It's very difficult. So, life is difficult, and sometimes you have to make difficult decisions that upset some people in order to save other people. That's the nature of life.
Yes,
The
I hope
question
you're
is
right.
where do we locate our responsibilities? When we're on our deathbeds, what do we feel we did to live a moral life?
Thank you, Roger Hallam, the co-founder of Extinction Rebellion.
Thanks.
And we are saying hello to Jennifer Morgan, Executive Director at Greenpeace International. Hello, Jennifer.
Hello there.
So just so we'll know, where are you talking to us from, and are you under any lockdown or quarantine?
I'm actually in Berlin. We now in Germany are able to go outside. We're able to go outside all the time. So I've been very privileged of just working from home and been healthy. So feel very lucky.
Okay. And how did the global pandemic affect Greenpeace and your work, the character of your work?
The pandemic, in a way, it affected Greenpeace in different ways. First of all, we, of course, all needed to work from home. And make sure that our staff were all really well taken care of around the world. We brought our ships back to Northern Europe, make sure our crew was safe. But as importantly, we also really shifted our work because of this disruptive moment that we're in, because we recognize that people are in a disruption. The economic system, the system that has kind of built up is wobbling, and Greenpeace has a chance to go into that opening and work with people to create a better world. So we've shifted our campaigning quite a lot.
For environmentally minded people, the connection between the coronavirus and all the environmental issues that are on stake is quite clear. But not many people do this connection, which I find surprising. How are you trying to overcome this, or to raise awareness that this is not the last word of nature, versus human beings?
I think we try and do it in a number of different ways. I think, first of all, it's been vital that taking care of people during this pandemic is the primary thing that leaders are focused on. It's what we've been focused on, acting in solidarity with healthcare workers, supporting scientists, et cetera, on taking care of people. But I think the other piece is really to help people understand those connections between, nature, and if you deforest a forest, if you export animals and do animal trafficking, and people get on planes, those things can bring these types of risks into the world. And also that we're all connected. I think, if you work on climate change, that the action of one government or a company or a person can impact somewhere else. But I don't think people really get that. But with this pandemic, it's quite clear that you have a responsibility to your neighbor. And I think that's something that people can relate to and hopefully bring that forward in their lives, after the pandemic is done, whenever that is.
And another connection is between the meat industry and the pandemic. I see there is a debate in the States because the major hotspots of coronavirus was in places where there are meat processing factories. Actually, 50% of the hotspots are due to those meat processing factories. But I don't see this debate in many other places, not in Israel, to say the least. Is this something you're aiming to talk about? Will this be part of your future campaign?
There certainly is, a connection there. If you look at, I think it is raising attention to that in the US. It's certainly also been the case here in Germany, where there was a hot spot, and it really showed, number one, the poor living conditions of the workers who were brought into Germany to actually work in those meat plants. Also, the very abysmal conditions of the animals themselves, and so Greenpeace has been working on eating less and better meat and dairy, and I think the exposure of that hopefully can make people more conscious of it. It's certainly something that will continue on, and I see cities around the world engaging on that, actually starting to have their schools or their own procurement limit needs. That was before COVID, so hopefully COVID will actually bring even more attention to that.
Yeah. So what are you working on these days? What will be the next campaign, act of activism?
Yeah, I mean, lots of different things, but I think two connected things I think it'd be wanted to talk about. One is, the decisions that are happening now. Okay, there's COVID, but then there's the economic situation, of course, which is extremely worrisome to everyone. And there are literally trillions of euros and dollars going into rebuilding, right? And one thing Greenpeace is working on is making sure that that transforms our economies into the jobs that can happen now in the renewable energy industry or in energy efficiency and different parts of the economy, so that we can chart a way into a zero carbon economy, not into airlines or oil or coal, right? Because that brings us into the past. And so there's Greenpeace campaigns happening all around the world to make that transparent, to have people engaged in that and hold politicians accountable, and also to build a better economy. If you think about it, what would it be like if our economy was based on ensuring the well-being of people, healthcare and social systems and environmental health? And this is a moment, I think, where that's being exposed a bit. Even the Financial Times is talking about neoliberal systems, and so Greenpeace is engaging in that quite a lot as well. And I think we will only be able to shift that kind of thinking if people are engaged. So lots of conversations with people in different countries and connecting them into those big conversations.
If we look at the pandemic, on one hand, it raised awareness to science and the importance of science, and also the importance of those international organizations such as the UN and the WHO, the World Health Organization. So this is maybe a good thing for the climate cause. But on the other hand, people are worried for their lives and they see it as a public health issue, and they don't see the broader picture. So do you find that it helped raise awareness to environment, or it is a regression for your causes in the narrative you're trying to implement?
Look, I think that people recognize that the current system isn't working. I think what the COVID crisis has done is it's really exposed, in a way, the inequalities around the world. It's exposed the problems even more. And it offers up an opportunity, actually, to build the world back together for a world that we'd really like to see. And so I don't think the world's going to look the same after COVID-19. I think the task right now is to actually build in that kind of that compassion and the courage and that we've seen of people and how they've responded to the COVID crisis now into actually, keeping things that they've experienced, whether it be, car-free zones in front of their house, or whether it's been having more time with their family and actually being with their family instead of getting on a plane and going to a short-term vacation. So that's where we are right now. And I think which way it goes, because there are two ways out there. There's a polarized, divisive effort out there on the one side, but there's also this chance for cooperation, for building a world that's based on environmental and planetary and human health. And that world is the one that we're fighting for right now. And I think that more and more people are starting to get that. And that's where Greenpeace is working with people to try and get those changes done. And the decisions of politicians in the coming weeks and months, and even year, I think it's going to make or break whether we have a chance to avoid a complete climate catastrophe or not.
Greenpeace is a veteran NGO. You've been here for many, many years. You've probably seen many stages and many different conscious shifts in public awareness, in government's actions, and also in the big players, which are the oil companies, for example. Do you see another switch right now? Do you think we are in a turn of a history kind of moment?
I do. I think we are in a turn of history kind of moment. I think you see it. You see it in the way that the oil companies are grasping to actually get billions of taxpayer dollars to hold on to something that they were in the midst of losing. Because before the COVID crisis, you had banks starting to pull out their funding of oil and coal. You had people suing oil companies. You had youth, all over oil companies. And I could see them, the beginning of this year, starting to realize that they're past, they were part of the past. But now they're trying and they're grasping for holding on to that. This is the moment that actually we can tip that. We can see, as we have in the last weeks, that actually renewable energy is performing better than fossil fuels, that it's a dependable energy source. And we can see actually the kind of society that we want to build that's more about solidarity with each other. So I hope that we can look back at this time 10 years from now and say, we got it, we did it, we had the courage to ask the hard questions and to engage to change the system that will really dictate the future of our planet.
Many environmentalists, we just talked with Roger Hallam from Extinction Rebellion, they think we have no time. They think this is too little, too late, and we really have to be more extreme in our activism. What do you tell them?
Well, I think it is too little, too late. And I think that there is definitely a space for peaceful protest and nonviolent direct action when we see that nothing else is working. And so we need to have people engage out in the streets however that they can in order to try and change that system, because the time is now. And if you think about all of that money going into the wrong direction, where we already were going in the wrong direction. So I just encourage people to do whatever they feel comfortable doing. Some people are ready to sit in the streets and block. Other people are ready to have a conversation with their neighbor or their school board or their representative. But now is that time to engage however you can, because we don't have time to just sit home.
So your activism is aimed towards public, big companies and governments, or who is kind of the target audience for your actions?
Well, I think it depends on the campaign. I think at the end of the day, we need governments to actually put in place laws that phase out fossil fuels, laws that create sustainable mobility systems, and that people can get around without polluting. So you need those laws, but we need a power shift. And the power right now in a lot of countries is in the hands of corporates. And so exposing that power that they have, exposing the fact that they've created this economic system for their own short-term profit, not for the well-being of people, in order then that governments will stop listening to these polluters of the past and really listen to the youth activists and people who want a better future. And so for that, Greenpeace will be working with whoever we can, but governments need to step it up and do the right thing, and we'll be there to hold them to account.
So with this, we'll finish. I thank you, Jennifer Morgan, the Executive Director of Greenpeace International. Thank you.
Thank you very much.